Welcome, everyone, to Menttium Matters Podcast, where we talk about leadership, life, and the transformative power of mentoring. I'm Megan Cummings-Kruger, and today we'll be talking with Mick White, a speaker and coach and the visionary founder of the 100-Year Manifesto. Mick grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, so perhaps it's not surprising that early on he had a clear view of thinking outside of the box. During his own journey of personal and professional development, he realized his belief that purpose elevates people, profits, and ultimately the quality of life. It is his approach to purpose that has proven transformative. Mick has found out that when people are aligned with their purpose, when they are able to step into their greatness by harnessing the power of purpose, they become healthier, more engaged, and more fulfilled. And this creates a ripple effect that positively impacts every aspect of life. So as you will hear, Mick's 100-Year Manifesto is a framework that supports this work. It provides the structure for decision-making, and it is a pathfinder for success. And through his 100-Year Manifesto Academy, he's helped companies help their people to thrive and define their purpose and then live out their purpose. Mick's insights and stories have been featured in such prominent outlets as CBS World News, Coffee and Closers, and the 12-Week Year. His impact extends globally. He's spoken in 2024, not only across the country, but also to representatives of 27 countries at international events in Thailand, the Bahamas, Mexico, and the Philippines. When he's not speaking, working with companies, or hosting his monthly events of purpose-driven coffee and the best lunch ever, he's with his 9-year-old son, McAllister, who affectionately calls him Dad Ultimate. So with all of that being said, I want to welcome Mick to the podcast. Welcome, Mick.
Well, thank you. I tear up just hearing some of it. Just my life hasn't necessarily been easy, but it's been beautiful. And of all the things, like you're talking about the family of entrepreneurs, I was thinking of my dad and my mom and their impact on me, and just a whole community of impact of people who have helped me along the way, whether they knew it or not. But then at the end of the day, this little kid of mine, like he turns 10 this week, and like he's amazing, and it's just meaningful. I think and that's really what I am passionate about. What are we doing, and what is your purpose? And let's get beyond. What do you think of the weather? What do you think of the game last week? What do you think about things and stuff versus what are you doing with your life? And McAllister, my son, started calling me Dad Ultimate because he's got this YouTube channel. Because what kid doesn't have a YouTube channel? And we just had it because he wanted to have it, and it just kind of grew, and then it became a thing, right? But early on, you got to have a stick, right? You got to have like, this is my thing. So he became McAllister Ultimate, and then for a while, like we couldn't figure out what my name was, and then it ended up being Dad Ultimate, which I giggle because it's not my persona, but that's what he calls me, and I like it's humbling, and at the same time, there's a Spider-Man, like, with great power comes great responsibilities. Of like, if somebody calls you Dad Ultimate, you better live up to it the best you can. So anyway, it was a long-winded answer to say I'm excited to be here, and thank you for having me as your guest.
No, absolutely. And that is a perfect starting point with my first question, which is, I'd love for you to share with our audience what really inspired you to realize this vision of how to approach life. There was another podcast that you did, and I really appreciated that you emphasized when you were explaining all this, the question is not what do you want to be when you grow up, but who do you want to be? So would you share more about your inspiration, your parents, all of that?
For sure. I think, with that question, there's this idea of ask the wrong questions, get the wrong answers. And in American society, there certainly seems to be this from an early age, 3-4 years old, you're asking kids like, what do you want to be when you grow up? When people go to college, what are you majoring in? What are you going to do after college? And like all this pressure on what? And I think if we've seen anything in professional sports, even like Tiger Woods, perhaps the greatest golfer of all time, it still wasn't enough. And we don't ask the question for my son, like, I'm not overly interested. Not that I shouldn't say I'm not overly interested. What he does for a revenue stream when he's an adult isn't what I'm trying to solve for in parenting. Who he is what I'm trying to build his character and help him develop. So I think if we ask that question, who do you want to be when you grow up? Like for any of us, like that change. I want my son to be a good person. I want him to love his neighbor, to be empathetic, to be kind, and to help out, to have good, healthy boundaries. All those good, like that's what I'm trying to solve for. And so I share that because there's a lot of pivotal moments in my life. But as you were talking in the introduction, I was thinking of my father, who's been in the insurance industry, for 45 years, since I was just a elementary school. And I didn't really realize dad was an entrepreneur. Like dad was just my dad. And, and so for 20 years, I was in the insurance industry. I was in my dad's office for 9 years, right out of college. He and my mom worked together in their office. So I had the opportunity to work alongside my mom and my dad. I actually had to fire my mom one time, which is probably a whole different podcast. I don't recommend, but that had to happen one time. But anyway, my dad, he checked all the boxes for a good life, like doing married, kids, house, dog, even if he didn't want the dog. We had a dog, like church, chair of the board at the church, Rotary Club, Chamber of Commerce, like all those things. And, in his company's Hall of Fame professionally. And yet, 4 or 5 years ago, as I had made a transition in my life, I helped dad create his 100-year manifesto. And he came up with his purpose in life is to be a minister of joy. It wasn't a financial advisor. It wasn't even a dad or a grandfather. Like all those are titles. Who he is this minister of joy that he gets to live out through being a dad and a grandfather and a neighbor and professionally. But it started with taking a step back and that's who he's always been. He's always been the guy coming down the stairs when I was a kid singing zippity doodahs, which was super annoying when you're trying to eat breakfast and you're like 10 years old. Like, Dad, stop. He's waking up happy, full of life. So I had that as part of my childhood. And then my mom, she unfortunately passed away 13 years ago, very suddenly at age 58. And she posted on Facebook before she died. She didn't know it was an accident, just happened, she just wasn't there one day. And so, but about 6 months before she passed away, she posted on Facebook a quote along the lines of, maybe I was put on this earth not to do anything extraordinary, but to do something small out of great love. Do something ordinary out of great love. Just this idea of, I don't need to go conquer the world. And how she showed up and loved people. Her success wasn't in trophies, wasn't in, being an influencer as we think of today, wasn't by having a lot of followers online. Her visitation was 7 hours long. God bless my mom. She was a grocery store clerk. She didn't go to college. She worked for my dad, like didn't drive on the highway, probably never knew who the president was. Like a lot of stories about mom. Mom thought banana Twinkies had real bananas in them. So like she was amazing in all sorts of beautiful ways, but she had this impact on people, simply how she loved them. If she had a 100-year manifesto, or to be able to identify her purpose, it would be something along the lines of love everybody always. Like it was not her revenue stream. That was her life. And she was stubborn and, as we all are, had her own quirks. But 7 hours worth of people showed up at a visitation because of how she loved them, from people from the AA hall to CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and everybody in between. So those two things happened. And then I think the third major moment in my life was my son, when he was born. His mom and I were in a really heavy season in our lives and some major health, just heaviness. and our marriage didn't make it. And a lot of people were really upset about it. And I always went back to, we're doing the best we can. And when I said for better, for worse, in sickness and in health, I meant it. And so how I show up with her, even today, 10 years after our son's been born, is part of who I am. And I think the more that I just focus on who I am and how I show up, that's what I have control over. I was in counseling during this heavy season with my son's mom. And the first day in counseling, I'm there, and we're gonna call my counselor's Bill because that was his name. And he said, "What's your goal in all of this, Mick?" And I'm like, "My first day. I'm 40 years old. I've never been in counseling before." And I'm like, "I have the dumbest counselor in the whole world. Like this is awful. This is why I'm not ever in counseling." And so I'm like, "I want my wife to come home." And I'm like, that is clearly why I am here. Like my life is a mess. And he said, "Mick, you don't have any control over that. That can't be your goal." And I'm like, "Well, I don't like this guy. Like that's my goal. Like it's specific, it's measurable. Like I'm trying to walk him through what a SMART goal is." And he's like, "Mick, you don't have control. That is her choice, not your choice." And it was really at that point that it gave me just this permission to focus on my own self and how healthy it is to put your own oxygen mask on first rather than trying to do that for everybody else and like, "Well, I got some coffee, like just let's go." How that self-care and living out your purpose is essential. Could share a lot of different things along those lines, but I think that those are probably the three pivotal moments of dad being an entrepreneur, not knowing how he was living out his purpose, but he was. When he finally identified it, it just everything made more sense. My mom, whose purpose was really simple, as she was, but she lived it out daily in a really beautiful way, is to love everybody always. And then with my son's mom, of what does unconditional love really look like? What does, when you make a commitment, living it out? And then, how you can continue to show up on your terms, because that's who I am. And having that kind of as this has molded me into where I'm at in life. I think I realized then there's a reason why I talk about what I talk about, right? Like I've been through stuff. And then I think because I talk about this, because I'm not ashamed that I have anxiety. It's not something that I chose to have. It's a medical condition, no different than I would be ashamed if I had cancer. But the way we show up in society with mental health, where people are often embarrassed by it, like there's something wrong with them. And I'm just the one who's like, I raise my hand, like I have incredible amounts of anxiety, sometimes attacks. And I didn't even know I had anxiety until I was 40. And I've built all these coping mechanisms around it. And, so anyway, I think all of those things have converged into a space because I share about it, that people will reach out and they're like, "Mick, I want to hear your story," or "I'm going through some stuff. Do you have any advice?" And I think that is just a really human way to live, of like, this is what's going on in my life. And I think if we got more into that space with people, life gets better.
One of your messages that I also loved was you need to get to know who you are so that you can get to know your why. And I think about our listeners who, are thinking about, well, I'd love to figure out my 100-year manifesto. What is step one? So could you share with the audience, once you've done the pause,
Mhm.
you start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, yes, to start with the pause, like just to slow down for a moment and breathe. And we don't give ourselves much margin and space in our lives to do that. As I was going through a lot of this heavy stuff with my son's mom, I'm not from Minnesota. I didn't have any family here. My dad came to visit, right? Like, so I got this 10-month-old son on my lap and life's a mess. And I asked my dad, "What would you do if you were me?" and out of desperation, right? Like I'm asking for help. And my dad said something that will always stick with me. He said, I don't know. I'm not you. And it gave me this permission to really be myself and to not necessarily do things the way everybody else does them or do things the way he wanted me to do them, but just, I'm going to do the best I can. And so I share that because I think when you have that pause and then giving yourself permission to be like, I'm going to live out my life. And this might be different than mom and dad's vision for my life, might be different than my friends, what they would do. And that's okay. And then another thought that in this space of when my mom died, the question I struggled with the most was, how am I supposed to live the next 50 years without my mom? Like, that's just over. And if you have anxiety, this question just keeps happening over and over. And I couldn't figure it out. And then one day I realized, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months into her passing, of I don't have to live the next 50 years without her. I just need to get through today. I just need to get through this next hour. I just need to get through these next 5 minutes. And so I think as Americans, we have this, the more we plan and the more we strategize and the more we have these things, we have more control, and that feels good. It's scary being like, I don't know. What's tomorrow going to be like? Don't know. Like, what's going to happen if you make this decision? Well, all I know is it's the right decision. And I'm going to keep trying to make the most right decisions I can. When values are clear, decisions are easy. When I'm able to identify my values and who I am, those decisions become easier. They're not easy. They just become easier. And so I think when sometimes we make this 100-year manifesto or this define your purpose or your why, I think oftentimes of people talk about baby steps, and they kind of minimize what a baby step is. And they're just taking, it's a small step. I'm like, listen, that baby step is the biggest step that baby has ever taken in their life. And when that happens, we take photos and videos and we cheer them on, and a baby falls and gets back up and falls and gets back up. And there's a whole community surrounding this baby. Like, you're doing it. You took a step. Like, for an adult, that's not a very big step. We don't congratulate ourselves most of the time. Be like, I walked across and got some coffee. Good job, Mickey. Didn't fall down. But we minimize what those small steps look like. And ultimately, that baby had a belief that they could take a step. And they tried. And maybe it didn't work out the first time. Maybe it didn't work out. They had sometimes people holding their hands up above them, trying to help them walk, like all those things. Like, taking a baby step, you just take one, and then another, and then another, and a couple weeks and a couple months later, you're not crawling around on your belly anymore. Maybe you're not running a marathon, but you took some steps. And
that is such a powerful analogy, Mick.
And then have people in your life that cheer you on while you're doing it, who don't make you feel bad because that first step you took, you fell down. Like, oh, you fell down. Like, no, the people helping you walk and take those steps keep cheering you on. That's the environment I want to be able to create, a space where people can take a step, get encouraged, have a cheerleader, have some accountability, like, okay, we're going to try to take another step when you're ready. But those baby steps, that's all any of us can do. And so, like, what do I have control over? From my counselor, Bill, walking me through a lot of these things and goal setting and other stuff. Like, I'm just taking baby steps every day. And then what happens? I don't know. Like, good things over the course of time? a lot of really good things are happening from baby steps 5 and 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a powerful analogy. I love that, Mick. And I'm thinking, and again, obviously, of course, with no identifiers, but when you think about all the different clients and companies that you've worked with, does a story come to mind that just surprised you and how that shift of awareness really impacted them?
Yeah, yesterday. Well, how about this? How about yesterday? And it's interesting because I share a lot of these stories and when on stage and different things like sharing this social media, or just however, right? One of the things that changed my life, and it kind of goes with this baby steps, is I was in corporate training 2009. Somebody comes in and the trainer's like second day afternoon, we're getting ready to go home. He's like, okay, now everybody has to make 3 personal commitments that they're going to keep for the next 12 weeks. I was 30-ish, 35, somewhere in there. And I'm like, I wrote down kind of hidden. I didn't want anybody to see it. Was I was going to call my mom every single day. And I surely didn't want the trainer to call on me to ask me to share. So, you're kind of making all the distractions so he doesn't, like I'm not making eye contact. Fortunately, he doesn't call on me, so I don't have to share it with anybody. 643 days in a row, I called my mom. This small commitment. I called my mom. She answered every time. She was in the shower and she'd answer the phone. I'm like, oh no, mom, like don't answer the phone when you're in the shower. Like things you don't. She'd be in the movie theater and she'd be like, hello. I'm like, where are you? She's like, I'm at the movie theater. I'm like, mom, don't answer. She'd be in an AA meeting and it's super loud and things going on. And but she answered the phone and we had all these conversations about her childhood and life and just day-to-day stuff. June 13th, 2011, day 644, I called her and she didn't answer. And I knew that she had died. And I had shared this story. I share this story a lot when I'm speaking about the power of commitments, about like defining your purpose and doing that is great. Committing to it and taking action doesn't have to be a big step. Call my mom. So yesterday, I spoke last 4 months ago at a conference and I challenged them, and the conference was 3 hours away. And so I said at the end, I'm like, and if anybody keeps their commitment, anybody makes a commitment and keeps it, I'll drive back here and I'll bring you like a coffee mug and some t-shirts and some stickers and like we'll meet. A lady took me up on it. And we met yesterday and I drove a couple hours to go see her. And then she told me this story about how she made a commitment and her daughter had been through some stuff and her daughter's father was not a good human and some really awful things happened in their family. And that her and her daughter hadn't been talking much because of it all. She started texting and calling her daughter and told her daughter why she was doing it and she was going to do it for 100 days. 6 weeks later, she walks her daughter down the aisle at her daughter's wedding because she made the effort with her daughter not to fix things all at once, but kept showing up. And I think that is so powerful in life, of whether it's business or personal. Like, I didn't get in this situation overnight. I'm not getting out of this situation overnight. And if I just keep taking those steps and keep showing up, focusing on what I have control over there, we'll see where it goes. And so she went to her daughter's wedding, got invited to the wedding, and then her daughter ended up asking her to walk her down the aisle. Like, she's telling me this, I'm at this coffee shop, grocery store place, and I'm a mess. Because it's that simple. Like, it doesn't have to be a grand plan. It doesn't have to be some sort of big 100-year manifesto or anything else. Just taking seemingly small actions, committing to it over and over changes people's lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I know, your work, it seems to me it's as it's evolved. You kind of continued to stretch outside your comfort zone and kind of follow where you feel like it's leading. I know, for example, you've been really talking about how purpose elevates and that you've been really focused on your purpose. And I'd love for people to understand the different forms that has taken for you.
Yeah, for sure. I've learned over the years that who I am since grade school, I've always been a convener of people. I always love bringing people together and also highlighting and showcasing other people. Like not making it about myself, but in highlighting, bringing people together in a really healthy community. And so with Purpose Driven Coffee, 2 years ago, I went to a friend and just like, here's my idea. People keep reaching out to me to have coffee. People keep reaching out to you to have coffee. What if the first Friday of the month we just get together and have coffee? And I put together some more legs to what that format looks like. And 75 people showed up the first month. And they kept showing up every month. And then last year we launched our second location. This month we're launching 3 other locations, but in one online. And so 6 locations. So 450 people are showing up this month to have conversations about purpose and meaning and taking action. And that to me, like, that feels really good. Looking back, I was supposed to be a high school history teacher, but I'm far too independent. Fierce would not have been good. Any corporate structure would not have been good. So being able to teach and to lead and to guide people is really who I am. It's always been who I am. I've just had different occupations along the way. And so the Purpose Driven Coffee events is an in-person way to help people connect in community in a real human way. The second one is I've transitioned out of like one-on-one coaching because I think there's power in community. And oftentimes the people that I want to help the most, executive coaching, there's a certain threshold of revenue that people typically have to pay for it. And I want to be able to help people at scale. So created an online community called Purpose Fueled, where I also look at places that I would want to join as a busy dad and businesses and life and different things. It's hard for me to join a lot of in-person events or a lot of peer groups. But online is a space that I can engage with my friends from around the world in community and to do business and life together. And then the third one is when I first moved to Minnesota, I was building a financial services firm. And it wasn't until last year that I realized the impact of this story. And I was up here building a firm, and another firm leader was getting fired in the town that I lived in. And I thought that the state director were having lunch, and I thought he was going to offer me that position. And so I'm excited. I was 31 years old, building a firm. They're going to offer me like, here's an opportunity to grow your firm. And instead, we sit down and he has a conversation with me that I don't have a future in management. And that he said to me, I should go be a corporate trainer. And I was furious, like 15 years of fury at this man, because I'm like, I'm a leader. This is what I do. I build people up. His idea of being a corporate trainer was to go work in our home office as a trainer. Looking back today, what I am doing, there's a corporate training element to it. What he didn't say was, Mick, you are fiercely independent. You're always going to be inventing and coming up with your own ideas. That doesn't fit really well in the corporate space with a Fortune 500 company. Go start your own company and I will be your first client. So what I'm doing today in that corporate training space is this now in the last, even since we've last talked, rebranding it as the Purpose Academy, as a space for people, for companies to help their people define their purpose, live it out, and then through this purpose quotient assessment to measure how they're really doing. Like people say, well, Mick, how are you doing? I'm like, good. You're like, "Yeah, how are you doing as a dad?" I'm like, nah. Like, we measure everything as Americans: how much we weigh, how fast we are, like what reading level we are at, like all these things. But there's never been a way to like measure how are you doing. And so I think being able to help companies help their people in that space, how are you doing? Find your purpose and live it out, and then to measure that is a really powerful space where I think of my mom. My mom was never going to go to a conference. She was never going to have a coach. The company would never have invested in her as a person in the 1980s, 1990s. Today is different. Today, you can have coaching and community and at scale and impact at scale without just, hey, here, Mick, read a book. Not everybody are book readers. Not everybody's a podcast person. And so being able to create this Purpose Academy with the premise of the healthier your people are, the healthier your company is going to be. And if your people are really healthy and your company is really healthy, I'd be willing to bet that you're going to make more money. And so the purpose elevates people, purpose elevates performance, joy, and profit at the end of the day. But it's not necessarily the purpose of the company, but the purpose of the individual. And it doesn't mean, like for my mom, her purpose being love everybody always isn't a job title. She could have been a receptionist. She could have also been a doctor with that title. So helping people define that purpose in who they are, I think the opportunity for companies, one, to do good and help their people. Like, I don't need an app to tell me I'm not sleeping well. I already know I'm not sleeping well. What I need is someone to help me define my purpose. How do you live it out? How do you say no to things? What do you say yes to? How do you take those baby steps? Like being able to teach and deliver that in a way today with employees across the country who aren't all in the office. That is what ultimately I find the 500 people who are at Purpose Driven Coffee this month are all seeking more. And how can I help deliver that more at scale? So that's what I have going on. It seems like a lot sometimes,
but Nick, it's never been more needed. I mean, I have to tell you, as I listen to what you're saying, and my background's back in the day was psychology. My master's was all focused on education, and it really resonates on so many different levels. I mean, the power, what brings meaning to you is the ultimate human need. And when people are facilitated to figure out what that is in this time of overwhelming stress and pace, it's so needed.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So I'm in my spare time, I'm in seminary right now. But I'm convinced that any person, regardless of faith, non-faith, whatever it might be, can have purpose and meaning. And people are seeking that out. And what I've learned about myself over the years, and probably one of the reasons why I think about this stuff all the time, is I've always thought about this all the time. And from an early age, part of it is like my dad was in the life insurance industry. My mom used to read the obituaries every day. She's just small town Illinois, like every afternoon. In so much of my life, and from going to church, and like some of these thoughts just evolved into, I was richly aware of we're not here forever. And so I've also helped develop a healthy dose of anxiety that I didn't know I had for 3 decades. but always this sense of, I want to make sure one day that I've accomplished what my purpose was, and that I'm not guaranteed a tomorrow. And I just want to live and step into that greatness every day as much as I can, Because 100 years from now, the things that I have today don't matter. But the life you live is this lesson that you teach. And this legacy is hopefully will echo into eternity of some sort of maybe people don't remember me, they won't remember me, but how I lived and how I helped perhaps makes the world a better place today, tomorrow, and for generations to come. And that's really why I do what I do
Yeah.
is we're all in this together and I want you to win and I want everybody else to win. But more important than that, I want people to wake up and feel like they have that meaning and that there's significance and that that place of emptiness in their lives is no longer there.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
they get to walk down the aisle with their daughter at their wedding, at their daughter's wedding. Like
Yeah.
that's the impact I'm striving for every day.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. All right. Last question. And this
Yeah.
is going to be a tricky one. There's a famous quote that you probably are familiar with that you can never step in the same river twice. You know, the river keeps flowing and changing. We keep growing and changing. But as you think about who you are now and you think about you starting out, you know, speaking to that new young leader person, what advice would you want to give that young Mick?
Mm, that's great. I think there's a couple of things that, I just cringe when I hear them. And one of them is work-life balance. And it implies trying to spin all these plates and this work-life balance. Like it doesn't make sense. And my first tattoo I got when I was going through all these things in life was the congruence symbol. So if you remember congruence from high school geometry, it's this statement of agreement. And I want my life, all areas of my life, to agree. Like personally, professionally, fatherhood, faith. I want there to be an agreement. And so I think of that river analogy of I want all of my life going to the same destination, the same direction. Might be going at different speeds, but it's all still heading one way. And I think if there's any advice for the younger Mick is be more of yourself. Like step into who you are and give yourself permission to be different sooner. Like that's ironically enough, congruence was something I loved in high school. Like geometry, like made sense to me. 25 years later, people are like, that's the tattoo that you got. It's meaningful. I just want my life to agree.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Yeah.
Every day, like it flows together.
Yeah. Well, and circling back to what you said in the beginning, you've got to ask the right questions, right? To get the
Yeah.
right answers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Be careful questions you ask.
Yeah, exactly. One final question. I'm cheating
Yeah.
here, but it's probably hard to pick one. But is there one particular quote or mantra that really resonates for you? I usually have each year, I change them in and out, but do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I'll just because each year we'll go with that one. That one's easier because I have a lot, right?
Yeah.
2025, my mantra is all in, no regrets.
Mm,
Like that's it. Like that's I want to jump in, go all in, and not regret not doing things, not regretting choices. Just like I'm doing the best I can. I'm gonna make decisions the best I can, and we're just gonna see where life takes us.
excellent. I love that. Mick, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and insights. Your clarity of focus on purpose and intentionality, as we've been talking about, it's never been more important or more of a differentiator for all of us, in these distracting times. And it is inspiring to hear just how creative we can be in building community around our purpose and then what a difference it can make. I also want to thank all of our listeners for joining this Menttium Matters podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with friends and colleagues. If you're interested in additional resources, you can find our show notes on the Menttium website. We look forward to having you join us for our next inspiring conversation.